And again, welcome and thank you all for joining me this evening for the February Savvy series on emotional intelligence. Pretty excited about this topic and hope that you get a lot out of this session. We have a few things that we'll be covering tonight, and those include exactly kind of what is savviness for those of you who may not have joined us on a Savvy series webinar before. Exactly what is emotional intelligence, why you should care about it, and some overall strategies of how to change or increase your emotional intelligence, among some other things. So please feel free to ask questions at any time in the chat box, and I'll be checking that, and that's also where you will post answers to 3 questions during the webinar so that I can gauge your response. This is a requirement of NASBA for us to be able to offer you all CPE. So please type your responses in the chat box when those questions come up, and we'll also track attendance and responses so we can send you your certificate shortly. So for those of you who have not joined us on the Savvy series before, this is a webinar series that we started in 2014 for AFWA to provide essentially some skill sets and education that are not common, I guess you could say, in other organizations that serve the industry. And really the Savvy series was created to help you build critical competencies for success. We wanted to offer members the opportunity to grow as professionals and complement their hard skills and technical know-how, and so that they could function in a much higher level in terms of their career, in terms of their profession, and so on. And so a lot of people will recognize soft skills, if you will, but I like to refer to it as savviness, and it can really make or break your career. Being savvy is all about people skills and interacting with others, and many of you serve in other roles than just what your day job is, whether you're a volunteer or working with another organization, and so they're really critical to being successful. So essentially what I like to think of as we go through understanding emotional intelligence is just one facet of you as a person and understanding the different things that make you who you are. And I started to notice a difference between some career paths, and I think that's why we also wanted to include emotional intelligence in the Savvy series, because a lot of folks work in the black and white. There's an absolute answer to a particular question. There's no gray area, whereas others have a lot of things that depend, or they're not as finite. Coming from the grant and fundraising world, the answer is always it depends. So there's quite a difference between that and, say, accounting or finance, when something might have an absolute answer. So this is kind of where the interest in emotional intelligence for our members has really started. So what is emotional intelligence? You may see this referred to as EI or EQ. Both are correct. Emotional intelligence is sometimes referred to as people smarts, not necessarily people skills, but people smarts. And it's not generally included in the type of intelligence evaluation included in your traditional concept of IQ, which is more of a technical base and focuses on conceptual abilities. But it is very important in terms of an a personal attribute and your success. And so it relates to IQ, but it also complements it in a way. So if we are looking at an actual definition of what emotional intelligence is, we have the entire definition here in bold, and you can see some key points here. Capacity for understanding your own feelings and others, motivating yourself, managing your emotions, and managing those emotions in terms of relationships. And that's not just, say, romantic or personal relationships. Those are all relationships, so networking relationships, career relationships. Everything anymore depends on relationships. That's how you succeed. And so this just gets you one step further in terms of your success and understanding emotional intelligence. So why do we even bother with EQ? an employment search firm analyzed over 500 senior executives and found that the executives with strong emotional intelligence test results were more likely to succeed than were other executives whose strength areas were in either relevant previous experience or traditional IQ scores. So those who were succeeding because they had higher IQ, not necessarily, or higher EQ, not necessarily their technical skills or their intelligence. Research at the Center for Creative Leadership has shown that the primary cause of executive turnover was individual deficiency in the area of emotional competence. They couldn't relate to their staff. They couldn't relate to peers. And so it's something that certainly has affected their careers. And in another study that involved over 100 executives, results showed that there is a strong correlation between how well an individual handles personal emotions and the willingness of others to work with that individual. So if somebody is very self-aware of how they react to a situation or how they behave in a personal or professional environment, then they're more likely to succeed in working with others. Whereas someone who shoots from the hip may not recognize when their emotions are taking over in a situation that's supposed to be professional and without kind of consequences of emotion. You take the emotion out of it. Those are the ones that we want to work with. So there's a lot of stuff there that really is heavy, if you will. Those are the things that really matter when it comes to moving forward in your career and being successful. So when we look at emotional intelligence and what makes it up, it's not just a single characteristic. And emotional intelligence can be thought of as a wide set of competencies that are organized into a few major clusters. And so the most widely accepted view of emotional intelligence, and trust me, there are plenty of resources that you can pull on EQ and what exactly emotional intelligence is, how you measure it, how you develop it, but these are the four main areas. Those are in four clusters: self-management, self-awareness, social awareness, and social skills. So you can see where on that matrix there's self versus social and the regulation versus recognition, whether you control or it is recognition within yourself of how you're reacting. So with that basic understanding, I wanted to ask you on NASBA, or one of our check-in questions, and that is, how do you do self-reflection? And maybe you've never even thought of it, and that could be a perfectly acceptable answer. So put that in the questions box. Maybe you journal, maybe you take notes about yourself in terms of how you reacted to something. What are some other ways that you might do some self-reflection? So please put those in the questions box. Put your responses in the questions box or the chat box, either one, and we will track those as we go along. A lot of journaling, taking notes, or if you work with a professional coach or career coach, that could certainly be one. But how do you kind of check yourself? How do you self-reflect? Do you meditate? Do you do something else? And a good question from Ashley, what are some good examples of how to self-reflect? And I think some of that's going to be a personal preference in terms of whether you are more of a visual person or an auditory person, whether you would prefer to write something down, which is kind of where journaling and notes come from. But maybe you're, in terms of a visual person, maybe you also choose images that help you self-reflect, almost like a vision board, or even do you ask questions of those who know you in terms of gauging, and those who can actually be impartial to their response to you, but asking them for feedback in terms of how you handled something can also be another way to self-reflect. I think journaling is probably the most popular, but if you were journaling, it's also a matter of whether you're going back to those notes and those pages to see what you wrote, say, 5 days ago and how that's changed. So certainly there are a lot of ways. If you've meditated, if you do yoga, you go hiking, you go running. I know a lot of people who go running because it gets them into their head and they can spend time thinking. So all of those are really great ways to self-reflect. So we're going to cover each of the 4 competencies that fall into emotional intelligence, and we'll look at what they are and also how to improve them. And the first one is self-awareness, and that's the ability to accurately sense and identify personal feelings, along with the ability to understand and evaluate them. So to be fully aware of your feelings, you must first identify them, and then you must acknowledge and accept them. I think one of, I don't want to say my favorite, but what I have done in the past few years is realize how I react or how I act around certain people. Do they cause the best to come out in me, or do they cause the worst to come out in me? That's just part of that self-awareness, so that you can at least, if you know you have to spend time around somebody and you aren't in the best mood, you don't enjoy being around that person, but you have to be, that at least gives you that awareness to be able to change something or learn some coping mechanisms. So individuals who have high self-awareness are able to conduct accurate self-appraisals, are self-confident, are authentic, they welcome feedback, and there is a difference between feedback and criticism. They perceive situations accurately and are willing to take risks for what they believe is right. And emotional self-awareness is the ability to recognize your own emotions and their effects, to identify how you react to cues in the environment. That could even be something as simple as the weather and how you react to certain conditions. And to understand how your emotions affect your overall performance. If you're having just one of those days where you just really aren't enthusiastic about your job, you're not enthusiastic about the work that you have to do today, or you have a deadline, that's certainly going to affect your emotions and how you're successful for the day. Accurate self-assessment is the process of identifying your inner resources, your abilities, your strengths, acknowledging and accepting your limits. One thing I like to do on a daily basis is mark down lessons learned. So how can I change something that I learned from today, positive or negative, you know, what worked in something, or what would I try next time, or even the win. So it's really good to see, okay, this was a win today. I did this really well. And self-confidence is your own belief in your capability to accomplish a task. And self-confidence includes acknowledging and affirming that you are the best person for the job that you're doing. Somebody hired you for a reason, and so sometimes we just need to be reminded of that and make sure that we keep that in the back of our minds when we're starting to have some negative self-talk or start to question our abilities. The second competency of emotional intelligence is self-management. So it's one thing to be self-aware. It's another thing to actually do something. And self-management is also the ability to use your feelings to reason well and actually act intentionally. People who are good managers of their emotions are open to change. They're effective in mood management. They're consistent in stress management. They are intentional, productive, and behave in a reasonable and rational way. So it's also one of those kind of stress relievers, which can be part of self-reflection. You know, do you go running? Do you go work out? Do you read? Do you disconnect? How do you do that? Emotional self-control is the ability to keep impulsive feelings and emotions under control. Yes, we're going to get mad. Yes, we're going to be sad. Yes, we're going to be excited, happy, a whole range of emotions. but we also need to know when, yes, you can be in a negative mood, but how do you portray that, or how do you handle it so that it doesn't affect, say, your coworker or your staff. Also part of this is trustworthiness, and that's maintaining standards of honesty and integrity, and includes communicating intentions, ideas, feelings, and welcoming openness and honesty in others. So making sure that people are feeling welcome to tell you what's on their mind as well. Conscientiousness is about taking responsibility for personal performance and recognizing when you did something really well, and also recognizing when something could have been done better. And that's a lesson learned. And it reflects an underlying drive for being reliable and delivering quality work. Also included in self-management is adaptability. And that's the ability to be flexible and work effectively within a variety of changing situations, being flexible, being nimble. Optimism is, of course, seeing the world as glass half full, being able to see the good in others and in the situation, and thinking, yes, the best outcome is what's going to happen. And from this perspective, threats are viewed merely as opportunities. Say, okay, that's an opportunity. Say someone is vying for the same job as I am. Well, maybe that's an opportunity and I don't get it. Maybe that's an opportunity for me to realize I need more education in something, or more training in something. Or maybe that's an opportunity to be mentored by that person, which is hard. I'm not saying it's easy, but at least being optimistic even when the situation doesn't go in your favor. And last but not least, initiative. And that's, of course, being able to identify a problem, an obstacle, or an opportunity even, and taking action on it. So it's one thing to say, okay, I know this could be done. It's another thing to find the resources, the time, the gumption to take it on. And the third component of emotional intelligence is social awareness. And that refers to how people handle relationships and the awareness of others' feelings, needs, and concerns. And really that's, in one better word, empathy. And empathy is about understanding other people, ability to hear and understand kind of unspoken, being able to read body language, or partially express thoughts, feelings, having concerns for others. And I find that this kind of portion of emotional intelligence is sometimes harder for those of us who are working in something that's finite and black and white, say like accounting. Something has an absolute answer. And so when we see things from that perspective, it's harder to be empathetic, because that requires us to be flexible. It requires us to be a little bit more nimble than we have in our day-to-day work. In addition to that, social awareness also includes organizational awareness, and that's the ability to understand the power relationships in one's group and organization. And then it also includes the ability to identify the real decision makers and who can influence them, and recognizing the values and cultures of an organization and how they affect the way people act and behave. So when you know you have a positive underlying current within an organization, it shows. People are excited to be where they are. They want to help each other. They boost each other up. Those are the things that we will see when somebody understands their organization and plays into the positive pieces of that organization, or realizes maybe that's not a good fit for them and they need to find a different one. This also includes service orientation and social awareness. And it's really important for creating and maintaining good work relationships with other people. And people in high social awareness can feel what other people are feeling. They can relate and put themselves in that person's shoes. And last but not least, the fourth component of emotional intelligence are social skills. So people with good social skills are good business leaders, leaders in society, effective parents who can understand that personal success and group or family success are inseparable. And these people lead by example. They encourage others in positive ways. They validate others. They create trust. And you can feel trust. When you're really looking at a working relationship, you can feel trust. Developing others, we'll look at all these key areas. Developing trust, we promote the long-term learning or development of others. And it's a focus on the developmental intent and effect rather than on the formal role of teaching or training. So it's really more so kind of coaching instead of mentoring. And I find mentoring sometimes a little bit of a confining word when there's so much more to a relationship like that. Inspirational leadership, that's one in which you take on the role of a leader within a team or a group. It's one thing to be considered, quote, a leader. It's another thing to take on that responsibility of an entire group or department or division. And inspirational leaders work to bring people together to get the job done. They're very positive. They build a strong sense of belonging within the group, and others want to be part of that group that they're building. When it comes to influence, of course, persuasion, convincing, making somebody go along with what you are proposing, grabbing attention, and passing on something that they want to hear. And then in addition to that, we've also got communication. And that's the ability to, and this is pretty simple, but to send clear messages. You would be amazed at how many people can't communicate. So people with who are high in communication skills make their presentations engaging. Those are the people that you could listen to for hours because they tell fascinating stories, and the tone in their voice just keeps you engaged in what they're saying. And after communication, we have change catalysts, and that's having the ability to make people more alert, energized, leading people or groups to bring about specific changes in the way things are done. So it's one thing to say, okay, we need to change this. It's another thing to find the solution and push that solution through. Conflict management, you could spend a whole hour on conflict management, handling difficult individuals, groups of people, tense situations when people do get emotional. It involves coming face to face with conflict and not avoiding it, not necessarily being harsh or critical either, but being able to say, yes, this is an issue. How do we move on? How do we find a solution? And then building bonds. So working together, being friendly, reciprocal, you know, kind of like almost like gift giving, if you will, like when you receive something, at some point you feel a little bit more of obligation to also participate in that giving. And so those are just some examples of building bonds, but relationships, feeling not only connected, but you're not feeling obligated. You actually want to spend time with that person. And last but not least, teamwork and collaboration, working with others, being part of a team, working together as opposed to working separately or even competitively when you have the same outcome that you're trying to achieve. And really good, positive teamwork and collaboration is enjoying not only the shared responsibility and making sure that everybody does their part, but also there are rewards for completing that or making that accomplishment. So a good leader with high emotional intelligence and high social skills will make sure that their team is recognized as a whole for accomplishing something rather than taking credit for themselves. So we have our second NASBA check-in, and this is a pretty easy question. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being I really need to work on emotional intelligence, and 10 being I am totally rocking solid emotional intelligence, where would you rate yourself right now? Without implementing things that you're learning tonight, where would you fall on a scale of 1 to 10? And a wide variety of answers, too. So if you'll put that in the questions box. And we will use that for your CPE credit. So again, on a scale of 1 to 10 of emotional intelligence, where do you think you fall right now? All right. So hopefully, just with that basic understanding, and I'm sure that felt like drinking from a fire hose, so we'll have this recording posted so you can go back to some of those notes, and also you can download the slides. But once you are aware of the basics of those 4 components, we can work on improving them, right? So let's look first at self-awareness. Bradbury and Graves are the authors behind literally the book titled Emotional Intelligence and Emotional Intelligence 2.0. And these are coming from them. But increasing your self-awareness will require some serious thought and effort. That doesn't mean you have to tackle all of these strategies at one time. Maybe it's something that's incremental for yourself, or recognizing the one of, say, all of these different strategies that you really could implement tomorrow or next week. After Sunday, you've got yourself on a restart button for the week. And you will have to be objective about yourself and your own perceptions as you examine your inner feelings, explore your reactions to certain people or situations. And specifically, you will have to, if this is a hard area for you, summon the courage to be objective and identifying ways that make you want to change, and also being positive to that change. So let's look at several of these. You have to learn how to identify your true intentions and pay close attention to your actions. So you've got emotional self-awareness. So pay attention to the physical reactions aroused in your body during stressful situations. Do you sweat? Do you become short of breath? Do you get fatigued? What are the things that literally your body goes through when you are stressed, or when you are feeling some strong emotions, mad, sad, what have you, in a certain situation? So maybe it's you keep a quick journal of writing down your behaviors and inner feelings when faced with stressful situations on a daily basis. It can be something small, it could be something huge, but just noting your reaction to it, and come back later and try to understand that situation a little bit better. But we also have to look at accurate self-assessment. So when interacting with people with whom you feel comfortable, ask for their constructive feedback about your actions and behaviors. And sometimes people are going to be a little bit uncomfortable in sharing this with you, but tell them, this is supposed to be an objective exercise for myself. I really want to make sure that I understand what I do well and what I need to work on. And then make a list of what you believe to be your strengths, as well as areas where development is needed, and then compare your list and a similar list prepared by somebody else. Might be another suggestion, and getting somebody who is objective in helping you wanting to reach a goal. And then in terms of improving self-awareness, you can also look at your self-confidence. And again, this is easier said than done, but something just to think about, and maybe prioritizing what you might want to work on. But adjusting your thinking and behavior so that they closely match those of someone else models that trait of self-confidence. So if there's a person that you work with, person you know, it doesn't even have to be someone that you know, but maybe identify with who, say is a professional in the field or an expert in the field. With that model in mind, watch how they're reacting to something, how they act decisively instead of self-consciously, and see how you can model that. But also not being so self-critical of yourself that you can't be optimistic and realize that you can make changes to some things. So really find someone you trust who will be willing to help you objectively analyze your abilities. Sometimes that may be a family member, sometimes it may be a friend. If you don't think you have somebody close that could be objective, that's why there are coaches out there. So those are certainly some things to think about when it comes to self-awareness. Now let's look at self-management. So these are some of my favorites from these authors. Make a list of all the things that trigger you to lose control. Is it you feel confined? Do you feel like you get stressed out or emotional, like at certain times of the day or around certain people or specific tasks? If you find yourself being antsy whenever you have to sit down and actually do fine details, or does it stress you out to think of big picture or long range? So make a list of all the things that kind of trigger different emotions and create a strategy to prevent those triggers from causing you to lose your composure or self-control. I know even when I'm like antsy and I am feeling anxiety, I will either clean or I will bake something. And everybody that works around me knows that that's my way of kind of making sure that I check myself and get myself back in a place where I am not anxious. So consider the issues on which you're willing to act against all opposition as well, and that will help you make some strategies in which you can make those changes. Also, one of my favorites that is on here is sleep on it. Sometimes when I need to make a decision, I'm like, you know what, I feel completely different about it the next day. Or if I've lost a little bit of control of emotion, have been upset, or something has drained me, and I don't know how to react to it, sometimes that comes in the form of an email or a phone call, and somebody's left you a message that just sends you over the edge. I walk away from it, and you know what, go home, sleep, you'll feel better in the morning. That's one of my favorites. And when current strategies are not working, so you might look at all of these and see which one you could implement, stop what you're doing and acknowledge it's not working and make the necessary changes. So maybe making goals public is not good for you. Maybe that's anxiety producing. Maybe sleeping on it feels like it's not something that's going to work for you. It just delays the inevitable, and you can make decisions right then and there. Or even that negative self-talk, which every once in a while we all do it. I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not pretty enough, or I can't do this because. Those are all negative self-talk. And so those are things that you can also make note of. I even like when people journal. I've seen some folks journal and kind of measure on a different scale, you know, how they're feeling in terms of different emotions that day. So even rating on a 1 to 10 scale, if that makes more sense to you, try that one. And our next one, and I think I believe I have a typo in this next slide, should not be improving self-awareness. It should be improving social awareness. So I apologize. So in improving social awareness, there are several things that I like to think about. We go back to empathy, paying attention to critical interactions with others. Here's one of my favorites to see how you can judge emotion. Turn the sound off on the television, like put it on mute, and watch to see if you can identify moods and nonverbal cues from actors. So if you're not really good at empathizing or understanding emotions, try that and see what you're reading into it. When I mentioned organizational awareness, when it comes to this whole social awareness piece, and you could identify key people, say inside and outside the organization, who exert influence over policies, activities, goals, even say strategic plans for the whole organization. Maybe even look at creating an influence chart for your organization or your department that doesn't follow necessarily the true organizational chart. Maybe you have somebody who is so charismatic, who's say a middle manager, but has the ability to influence up, if you will, or manage up. So in your discussion with others, try to get their perspective on how to get things, say, done within your department or division, or maybe even your chapter, and try to provide information about the unspoken organizational constraints that might prevent you from getting to a point where everybody is cohesive. Also looking at social orientation. So, people watching, practice listening, and that's also one of my favorites, is to say most of us don't listen. We hear and are thinking of a response to what we've just heard, whereas listening, we're actually taking in what someone is saying and processing it and not coming up with our answer to whenever they finish. So it really is quite a difference. And so those are some things when you look at social awareness to think about, that body language, people watching. I love people watching, and trying that whole TV on mute and reading emotions is also really helpful. So last but not least, we have social skills as one of those 4 components of emotional intelligence. And I'll just hit on a few of my favorites and highlights, but developing others. So taking time to talk to individuals about their aspirations. I mean, if you're at a networking event, ask somebody about what they're trying to achieve in, say, the next year or the next few years, and try to think of how you can further that person. What is it that you're able to do to assist them in getting where they need to be? That goes a long way, especially in business, and it's certainly something that they will remember and will come back to you in spades. I'll skip inspirational leadership. I think those are really the ones that we're looking at. Key experts, or I don't want to say celebrities, because sometimes those aren't necessarily the ones that we need to be looking at, but say a leader that you find inspirational and shadowing that person. Also influence. So if we want to improve influence, one possible solution to that is forming a study group among colleagues, peers, friends, to talk about successful experiences and kind of reality test some strategies. So throwing out like an idea and having them punch holes in it, but also identify what would really work best with that strategy or solution. Communication, one way to improve that, identify and observe others who have an engaging style, whether they're, say, presenting. Pay attention to those people who are really good at giving, say, heads up. They keep people informed. What is it that they're doing in terms of their communication to make sure that everybody's aware of what's going on? Then we also have the change catalyst, and something that you might try is thinking about the worst possible change that might happen to you and your team or department. Is that somebody leaving? Is that the loss of a project? What does that look like? And then write a list of possible benefits from that change and think about how you would sell those benefits to the team and department if you had to. If you're the leader of that team and something goes wrong, how are you going to boost the morale of everybody and making sure that you can bring about this change in a positive way, and we can see past the negative part of change. Conflict management is, again, another one, and that's actually one that we've done a whole Savvy series presentation on, and I believe we have it coming up later this year. If you're sensing some trouble brewing with an individual, say they stop talking to you, they are passive-aggressive, they are being argumentative, they're not helping with the situation, take steps to bring the disagreement or grievance into the open, and when I say open, say in a private conversation between you and the other person, unless you feel like there needs to be a third person involved to mediate or make sure that the conversation doesn't go awry. But definitely don't do that in, quote, public, but bring it out on the table and realize that you can focus on the issues at hand and leave personal matters aside. Say, you know, that's one of my, one thing that I really try to do often is to say, you know, when something goes wrong or it doesn't go the way it's planned or somebody disagrees with me, it's not personal. It's a business decision. If you remember the movie You've Got Mail, it's not personal, it's business. So if that helps both you and the other person attack a conflict, maybe that's the most productive way to do it. So ask yourself, what am I saying or doing productive in trying to resolve this solution? Resolve this situation? What is it that I can do that's proactive and productive? Building bonds, and this is why I love associations. Take part in, you know, professional associations, groups, social events within your organization itself to build your network and strengthen relationships. And that certainly isn't only like connecting with somebody when you need something, and that goes back to that social awareness in developing others as well in social skills. But whenever you're doing that without something that you're looking for or with an ulterior motive, when you do need something, you feel more comfortable going to that person, even if you haven't spoken in months. Find out when that person's birthday is, or if you're friends on Facebook, you know, send a, you know, like something or post a quick message to them, just to keep that bond and that connection going, so that you can keep the relationship in which it's mutually beneficial. And last but not least, teamwork and collaboration. It may sound cheesy, but create a symbol, a mascot, something that your team can really rally around. Your own logo. You know, something that we're doing with AFWA this year is changing up the look of the conference, and that even it builds energy. Sometimes that change, something visual for your group, can be helpful. And avoid taking control of, say, an agenda, being the first to make suggestions, but at least have suggestions handy so that, you know, if nobody's coming forward, you can at least start the conversation. So last NASBA check-in question. Please put in the questions box the answer to what topic would you like to see in the Savvy series, or maybe it's something that we provide, say, a white paper or another skill building possibility out there that's part of Savvy series. What kind of personal development topic would be helpful for you? So please put that in the questions box or the chat box so that we can keep track of your credit. What topics would you like to see? What topic do you have the most questions about? Is it something, say, around how to network? Is it how to handle a crisis? Is it understanding social media even? Who knows? But if you can't think of something, certainly put in there that you can't think of something, and that will be helpful. And we can also at least give you your CP credit for being engaged. So some really great topics here. Conflict management comes up several times. Transitioning from team member to team leader is an awesome one. Conflict management, how to handle emotions, developing better communication, difficult conversations. I think some of these we do have coming up this year. So please stay tuned for some of those, but this is helpful in terms of developing what we would like to do moving forward. So please put your answer in the questions box about what topic might be helpful in terms of professional or personal development that you would like to see in the future. So I wanted to share a few resources. I certainly am not the author of anything on emotional intelligence or any foremost expert, but like to pull together some resources and kind of present summaries of things, and so that's where these presentations really come from. So some of my favorite emotional intelligence resources, there's a couple of different EQ tests, you know, like your regular quizzes and stuff online that will at least, you know, as long as you are honest with yourself as you're taking this, so that you can understand where some deficiencies are. There are a lot of in-person and online trainings around emotional intelligence. I'm sure Richard Pryor offers some. You probably could get some out of Dale Carnegie. There are a lot of training groups out there that will offer something on emotional intelligence. I've got the cover of Bradbury and Graves' book right here of Emotional Intelligence 2.0. I believe it has a quiz in the back of it as well, if I'm not mistaken. And maybe it's something that you tackle like quarterly, since there are like 4 major competencies of emotional intelligence. You know, clearly it's not something that you can change in its entirety overnight, so maybe you tackle it like each quadrant at a time, and maybe you do 1 a quarter that you keep front of mind and actively keep that in mind. And recent research suggests that the competencies associated with emotional intelligence, so those 4, are not set in stone at birth, i.e. those things can change. But emotional competencies are indeed those things that can be learned, changed, grown, and there are many benefits associated with developing your own emotional intelligence. And of course that ranges from personal to your entire organization, and that, you know, when we say organization, that could be your employer, that could be an organization that you belong to, you pay membership dues to, even small social groups and the like. And there's evidence to suggest that emotionally intelligent leadership is the key to creating a work climate in which employees are nurtured, they're encouraged, they're developed, and this goes far beyond what we, you know, would think of as, say, coaching or sponsoring or mentoring. It's really assisting someone in recognizing the best in themselves. So it's certainly something that there's a lot of resources on. These are just some of my favorites that you can explore the whole concept of emotional intelligence some more. And so at this time, what I will do is leave it open to any questions that you might have, and hopefully I have the answer, but if I don't, I can certainly try and find you an answer. If you do not have any questions, please feel free to hop off and enjoy the rest of your evening. We'll get CPE credit out to everyone here shortly. We usually try to process that within 2 weeks. And again, we also have, and you'll get a follow-up email through GoToWebinar with a link to our evaluation. But please give us your feedback in that survey. We really are thoughtful about the feedback that we get and are always looking for viewpoints and opinions. So if you have any questions, please put those in the questions box, or feel free to jump off and enjoy your Thursday evening, your Friday tomorrow, and the rest of your weekend. So again, if you do have any questions, please put those in the questions box. Thank you all for attending. I hope this has been very helpful, or at least giving you some things to think about.